right, this is an extended edit of the Joint House inquiry into 9/11, where there's additional commentary after the initial questioning from the panelists on the committee. So they're allowed to do follow-up questions after the initial first round of questions. And we're going to play all of the panelists' additional questions. And I will comment throughout parts of the video, and let's see.
Senator Shelby.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just picking up on your word here, it's one thing, Director Tenet, to perhaps dismantle them, and I think you have, or we have. And
by the way, they're interviewing the directors of the intelligence services of the United States, FBI Director Robert Mueller, CIA Director George Tenet, and NSA Director Michael Hayden.
they have, all of you, in some ways, but at the same time, by dismantling them, you've dispersed them.
That's an opportunity, sir.
Okay. Opportunity?
That's an opportunity.
Okay.
When you get people moving, that's opportunistic.
Because they're on the run, aren't they?
Yes, sir. That creates plenty of chaos in the system.
Sure. I want to get into something else. I want to pick up a little bit on what Senator Levin was talking about earlier. And this afternoon, late here, I'm not here to get into a semantic debate on the meaning of the word or term accountability. Obviously, the word accountability means different things to different people. To some people, it has no meaning, literally no meaning. To others, where you have real feelings of responsibility, it equals accountability means perhaps responsibility, you know, in that context. And it's troubling to me, and it was to Senator Levin and to others on this committee, that it seems from your testimony and other evidence that the staff has collected that no one is responsible, you know, in the CIA.
No one's responsible for what?
For the failures.
For what?
In other words, no.
For what? What do you mean for what? September 11, 2001. Obviously, there was some internal errors. And in your case, Tenet, it was outright malfeasance and willful obfuscation of hoarding information, which prevented the FBI, the Department of Justice, to do their job. You willfully and intentionally withheld information about two Al-Qaeda operatives inside the United States, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi.
No one is accountable.
That's the truth.
No one is responsible. No one's responsible at the Bureau, at the FBI. No one's responsible. In other words, it's no one's responsibility. That's troubling, very troubling. To each of you, what does the term accountability mean to you? I'll start with General Hayden. In this context, you know, if you have a job to do, and if you do it, or if you do it in a slipshod way, and there's no measure of performance, or if it is, nothing happens. Go ahead, General. What does accountability mean to you, sir?
There's a difference between a job not being done
Absolutely.
and a job being done in a slipshod way.
That's right.
And I think what Director Tenet was pointing out, that the issues that this committee and our dialogue has uncovered are systemic issues, that we put people in situations in which they had inadequate tools or inadequate circumstances to succeed.
Well, hey, wait a minute here, pal. You, of all people, also withheld information, even to the CIA, regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi. Now, because you are in charge of signals intelligence, you're the director of the National Security Agency, and you had a phone tap of two of the most important lines in the world at the time, Osama bin Laden's satellite phone and an Al-Qaeda communications hub in Sana'a, Yemen. And you didn't share that information to the counterterrorism unit at the CIA. In fact, at the time, the chief of Alex Station from 1996 to 1999 was Michael Scheuer. And Michael Scheuer went to the deputy director of the NSA, Barbara McNamara, and asked her to turn over the NSA's other half of the wiretaps on the house in Yemen, and they refused. God knows what they were talking about on that phone. The NSA would know.
Not always. Now,
What do you think bin Laden was saying on a satellite phone for 6 years?
we've had, General, we'll all concede that you need more resources, and we've worked with you, Senator Graham and other members of the committee, to revamp as a priority NSA, and you're
House
working toward that
Intelligence
goal. We
Oversight
have
Committee?
to. It's national.
Sir.
security. We've worked with Director Tenet.
Yes, you have.
I'm not on the Judiciary Committee or the Criminal Justice
Right.
Appropriations, but I know others have worked in that regard. I know you don't have too many resources, but a lot of this is decisions that people make or fail to make. Director Tenet,
Well, sir, let me just say.
what does responsibility, accountability mean to you?
Well, sir, when you look at this, I look at it in the following ways. I look at anybody's performance.
Sure.
I say, tell me about the integrity of the individual, how hard they were working. Tell me about their understanding of their job. Tell me about whether they were slipshod. Tell me about whether they were paying attention to detail and doing everything they knew how to do. Now, when somebody
Stop you a minute. Let me just say, in knowing everything they knew how to do. But what if you had people in these jobs that didn't know what they were doing?
Well, that's not true, because with the CIA's Alex station, they had the best legal and the best analytical analysts regarding counterterrorism at the time. In fact, in 1999, the CIA Alex station head, which was David Cohen, he created Alex station and implemented the best to head that station. It was Michael Scheuer. He was the best CIA, most experienced in terms of understanding radical fundamentalism. He spoke Farsi. And he was probably the best outside of John O'Neill in knowing the profile of Osama bin Laden. That's why he hated John O'Neill. He hated him because he was very domineering, and also he was probably a lot more experienced in terms of terrorism, international terrorism. New York is considered the best in terms of counterterrorism in the United States. So I don't want to hear that they didn't have, experience behind them. I mean, you had the man who headed the Alex station, the Bin Laden issue station, which is codenamed Alex station because Michael Scheuer's son is named Alec, and the codename was named after his son. And he hired Alfred M. Bukowski, Michelle Ann Casey, and they brought the FBI in, Mark Rossini, and later on, Dan Coleman, Ed Getz, the people over in New York counterterrorism. You have people at the FBI working with CIA analysts, and the CIA analysts basically ignored the FBI there because they knew that they were an extension of John O'Neill and they hated the FBI. So they barely shared any pertinent information with them. And we saw that. I mean, now it's for the public record that the CIA withheld information from the FBI regarding at least two of the hijackers of 9/11, Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafaa Hazmi. That's not speculation, that's fact. And I don't know how many times I have to say that, but yeah.
And didn't know the
So I don't want to hear that they didn't have the manpower. CIA did at the
standard. And I know some people at the Bureau, we had testimony here, didn't know the FISA standard, even lawyers over there, Director Mueller. I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that they're inadequately trained. Go ahead, Director Tenet. I'll try.
Well, I would take issue with that because it wasn't about the legality of the FISA warrant. It was the interpretation within the application. This is regarding Zacarias Moussaoui, the alleged 20th hijacker, in which an FBI agent who arrested him, Harry Sammet from Minneapolis, went to the radical fundamentalist unit in Minneapolis and told them that I'm going to give you an application for a FISA warrant to search his belongings because a regular warrant is for regular citizens of the United States and Zacharias Moussaoui is considered a foreign national, and they need a FISA warrant, a foreign intelligence service warrant.
Try not to stop you again.
And they didn't
No,
get
it's
it.
okay, sir. Keep going. I lost my train of thought. I apologize.
Maybe you'll pick it up again.
I was on a roll.
What is, no, you thought you were. You weren't on.
No, I was on a roll, sir.
I don't think so. Director Mueller, what is your feeling, how do you feel about the word accountability, the term accountability? Is that
You're asking
responsible?
the wrong people, by the way, for accountability. The three biggest obfuscators regarding September 11, 2001. Mueller, afterwards, post 9/11, he covered up the extra hijacking rings inside the United States, allowed the bin Laden family to leave the country without interviewing most of them. And pre 9/11, that's the CIA and the NSA, where they didn't share that information to who? The FBI.
Responsibility?
So
And
I
in the
think
context, or what
I
does
think
it
it's
mean?
Asking the
giving
wrong
people
people.
both the responsibility and authority to do a job, to set out parameters, what you expect from people, and if they do not live up to those parameters, then you hold them, quote, accountable. You
Hold
move
them
them, or you, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
But it is, the ultimate accountability is me. And
Right.
I have to set those standards. I have to give them the tools to do the job. It does not make any sense for me to hold somebody accountable if I have not been given them the responsibility, the authority, and the tools to do the job. That is just, that's wrong. And so in terms of something like the training on the FISA issue, it's a responsibility of me to assure when I see something like that we put into place the mechanisms to get those individuals trained. If we did not give them the training, I cannot hold accountable that person who was inadequately trained because I did not provide the person with that training.
Well, in 2004, the FBI's Inspector General issued a report investigating the Moussaoui matter, which was an investigation to how the intelligence agencies handled 9/11, specifically the FBI. And in their own report, they said that the Minneapolis field office had enough at their disposal to be approved of a FISA warrant. So now it's on the radical fundamentalist unit in the FBI in Minneapolis, headed by Marion Bowman and Dave Frasca. And they're the ones who basically said that the wording of the FISA warrant was not legitimate for a FISA warrant. Yet, the FBI's own Inspector General report says they had enough. So it's not about inadequate training.
I want to pick up
Not about it. Nothing to do with it.
lastly on Senator Levin's statement, paraphrasing.
Now,
Has
please-
anyone in the CIA or the FBI been held accountable for the failures thus far
No.
of September the 11th or the
Not
events
one, even
leading
now.
up to it? Director Tenet.
No, and there's a reason.
Because they didn't prevail.
What's
We're in the
reason?
middle of a war.
Oh, wait a minute.
We're in the
Wait,
middle of a war,
oh,
sir.
That's
And
not
I'll
much
tell
of an
you-
excuse,
No,
Director
sir,
Tenet.
there's-
Let me tell you
No,
something.
that's,
No,
well,
wait a minute.
it's my judgment to make.
Well, I know it's your opinion. Let me tell you what happened. Do you know in the Second World War, when we were in the war, that there were just dozens and dozens of generals that were, and captains of ships, especially the submarines, that were brought, were replaced immediately. You ever heard of Kasserine Pass, Anzio Beach, those things? They jerked generals out of the war and put people in. Patton went into Kasserine Pass after Rommel defeated the American forces there. Anzio Beach, I forget the general's name, but he was supposed to have been, you know, the up-and-coming general. He was brought back stateside. I think there has to be accountability. That's what Senator Levin was talking about. I think you ought to go back and look at the real meaning of the word. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shelby. Congresswoman Pelosi.
Thank you very much, Mr.
How is he going to take accountability? He willingly withheld information from the FBI. And he's sitting there actually defending himself. What does that tell you about George Tenet? What does that tell you about the agency itself? If he doesn't take accountability, none of them will.
Mr. Chairman.
Hardly any of them.
Pelosi.
Can't say all of them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, gentlemen. I want to also commend the members of our committee for their very wise judgments that they are bringing to this joint inquiry. And wisdom is what we need now, because certainly we have to have accountability internally within the agencies and externally up the chart to the President of the United States. We also don't want to find a scapegoat and say we've solved it, but for that we would have not had September 11. We really have to protect the American people in the future, so we have to be, I think, judicious in how we evaluate any one piece of information and how it all relates to each other and what the accountability is. I have serious concerns that our civil liberties may be, part of our civil liberties may be part of the price we pay for our falling short in areas.
Wow, look at that. She's willing to sacrifice civil liberties for the safety and security of the American people. Well, without civil liberties, we don't have safety and security of the American people. I mean, some of these people, like this dinosaur here, she doesn't care about the American people. How could you care about the American people by saying we'll have to sacrifice civil liberties? So my safety and security has to be lessened so that everyone else's safety and security can be heightened. But by that regard, every single American's safety and security is to be lessened so that we can have tighter security measures in which the intelligence agencies allegedly provide, and they failed to do so, not because they were inadequate, but because they committed malfeasance, and maybe even worse.
Is where we should have done better.
I mean, I'm not, now, 17
Better.
years later, look, this was in 2004. 17 years later, what do you think our civil liberties are now? Worse off than when it was in 2004.
So I think we have to, after we go through all of this, step back and try to make some evaluations without declaring something the cause, which would be a false sense of security.
No, I know what the cause is. The cause is that the NSA and the CIA didn't provide adequate information to share with other intelligence agencies for whatever reason. And then you had, even worse, you had foreign intelligence rings of Saudi Arabia and Israel inside the United States committing espionage and spying on the people who were involved with the 9/11 attacks in California, in Florida, in New York, in New Jersey. Not speculation, that's fact.
To the American people. I have a couple observations. First of all, I don't want the day to go by, Mr. Director, but without saying to you, Mr. Tenet, that I've looked at the legal class. What we want is to find the truth. And that's why many of us have advocated things that we've talked about earlier in terms of the commission, et cetera. And we want more openness wherever possible. And certainly we don't want to jeopardize sources and methods or legal cases or whatever. But we want the truth and we want openness. And I looked at the legal justification for keeping classified the government positions to which certain intelligence information was provided. And I think the legal arguments that were made were not compelling in my view, and I think it's a misapplication of the classification standard. Moving on from that, getting back to my main point about opportunities that were there, which may or may not have been dispositive of this issue as to whether we should have known, could have prevented, and are helpful in the future. But there are certain windows, the Moussaoui window, windows of people coming into San Diego. I happen to think, we're trained in this committee, as all of us are, I think, that force protection is our first priority, to protect our young men and women in uniform wherever they are, not only when they are in battle, but also wherever they are. And I would hope that in the future we would see the vulnerability we have when somebody comes into San Diego, for example, which is rich with service people and installations, that we would be even more careful.
Well, listen, if you want to get to the real root of the problem, it's our foreign policy. And who's in charge of our foreign policy? Well, at the time, it was the Bush administration. Oh, excuse me. And they had nothing but neocons, people with dual citizenship with Israel and within the cabinet. I get a small group of people who codename themselves the Vulcans, and that would be Condoleezza Rice, or Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Pearl, the ghouls of the late 20th century. And these are the people that gave us the wars that we see today, with their disastrous foreign policy outlines, with also Israel's foreign policy outline, the Oda Yadam plan, and the Paul Wolfowitz doctrine. And these are all, like I said, these are all dual nationalists of Israel and the United States. And then you have the Saudi lobby basically in the shadows giving congressmen like Nancy Pelosi and Doug B. Ryder and, who God knows who else on this panel, millions of dollars, annually, which come from their, relief charities and their, the more opulent and the bigger the mosques, like the Muslim Youth League, Muslim World League. So yeah, I mean, these people have interests, especially in oil, and as well as weapon sales. God knows how many of these panel members are affiliated with Raytheon or Boeing, and have private military firms that are interested in them as well. And then you have the U.S. Saudi ambassador, Prince Bandar bin Sultan, who's probably friends with some of these people like Nancy Pelosi and Bob Graham. So yeah, no, these wouldn't be harmful interests, would they? Yeah, I think they would be.
Even more careful.
This is the problem. This is why the Middle East doesn't like us.
Because of the exposure we would have to our forces there, recognizing, of course, we want to protect all of the American people. It's interesting to me, Mr. Director Tenet, that did I conclude correctly that the arrest and apprehension of Moussaoui may have hastened these folks to move on more quickly?
It's just a judgment, Mrs. Pelosi.
And
I mean, I could be wrong. I mean, it's a personal judgment.
I appreciate your reinforcing that judgment. In your testimony, it contains many instances, Mr. Tenet, where in which strategic warning was provided about the possibility of terrorist events or attacks. Your testimony contains, though, few, if any, instances in which tactical warnings were provided about a specific attack to occur, a specific place, specific time. Tactical warning, of course, is by definition actionable. Strategic warning suggests general action, if any. Strategic warning tells us something bad may happen somewhere at some time. What action should flow from this type of warning? What is the value of that type of warning that we can, how can we act upon that?
Well, Ms. Pelosi, what we tried to do when you read through the testimony and look at the disruptions and all the things, we tried to change the balance. And when we couldn't get a tactical warning, we tried to get things moving so we could generate more information to stop things. There's a stream of things that were stopped here. Numerous places and attacks and individuals that we apprehended who were going to. So what you're trying.
Not one. Not one. East Africa embassy bombings. Even though the ambassador of Tanzania, which was the other embassy, was that the ambassador of Tanzania to the United States, and Tanzania ambassador, months prior to the attack, basically said that we need stricter measures at the embassy because we feel that the embassy is about to be attacked through intelligence reports. And the CIA was one of those agencies that gave intelligence to them, and the attack happened anyway. Do I need to mention 9/11? I mean, God's sakes. I don't know what the CIA did or didn't have regarding other areas, maybe 1993. I'm not sure. And if they did, they wouldn't tell us anyway.
Trying to do through this kind of plan.
So, who knows?
Planning is make your luck, be disruptive enough to collect additional information, have operations, drive analysis to give you the ability to figure out if you could ever get that tactical warning. And that's the hard part of this business. Now, I'd say, you know, if you look at where we were last year compared to this year, we're much better in that regard overseas. The disruptions and information we've collected have not only given us tactical warning of events that were going to occur overseas, they've given us real and valuable strategic insights into targeting and planning that we can then provide perhaps through Homeland Security or other means. So it's a dilemma. It's always that when is the date, time, and place of an event.
Or even something narrower than, we always say in California that people have predicted 10 of the last 2 earthquakes. You know, they're always saying there's going to be an earthquake, and
Right.
then a couple of times it happens. But that's pretty good, 2 and 10. That's pretty good, at least, and we have some idea where these things may happen because of the fault lines. We have to have a better idea of the fault lines in the U.S. so that we can have a higher, our strategic warnings can.
You know, the object of any intelligence agency is to collect intelligence, information, specifically prior to an event even happening, right? That's what the intelligence agencies are supposed to do. And the CIA did their job. So did the NSA. They collected intelligence prior to 9/11 attacks, which could have halted the attacks if they shared it with the FBI. That's not me speculating. That's a mere fact. And that's throughout the intelligence reports that were collected prior to 9/11, and even the global intelligence community in the summer of 2001, which gave a flood of reports that bin Laden is going to attack the United States. That's the conspiracy. The conspiracy is not that they didn't have the intelligence, they had a flush of intelligence. Don't believe me? Why don't you ask former senior executive Thomas Drake of the NSA? The NSA had so much metadata prior to 9/11, according to him, they could have stopped 9/11 from even happening. But they didn't. And that's just the NSA.
Be narrowed down to more tactical warnings. It appears that my time is up, but if anybody would like to make any observation on that, I'm sure the chairman and his generous gavel would allow.
Ma'am, I understand exactly what you need, and frankly, we did very well in the summer of 2001 with strategic warning. It was tactical warning that was missing. But the analog to the
Who
fault
knows
lines.
the tactical warnings? Look, just imagine, just think of this. Between 1996 to 2001, the NSA had a wiretap in an Al-Qaeda communications hub in Sana'a, Yemen. They were monitoring incoming and outgoing calls for 6 years. They also had a wiretap on bin Laden's satellite phone from 1992 to 1996. I mean, 1992 to 1998. That's when bin Laden ditched the satellite phone. That's 6 years. Let me ask you, people who are watching this video, what do you think they were talking about on those phones? Were they talking about operations? Were they talking about specific people involved with those operations? Were they talking about specific people in Al-Qaeda? About plans for operations in the future? About the who, the when, the what, the where, and the why? Yes, that's what I think. And there's your conspiracy. Your conspiracy is, and this is speculation, that the NSA may have had the holy grail of all information, not the CIA, not the FBI, but the NSA. And that they didn't share that information with even the CIA or the FBI or the Department of State, but they kept it.
It's one
That's what we have to ask. But who knows?
step short of a perfect analogy.
They'll
And it's
say,
simply this: our fault lines change their minds.
No, we didn't have.
Our fault lines decide not to crack because of our issuing warnings about the fault lines. So it's a more difficult thing for us to measure.
I appreciate
A reasonable hypothesis is that the NSA listened to say 9/11, right? They heard about the 9/11 operation on the phone, and that some people in the NSA, maybe even Hayden, sees the intelligence reports and allows the Saudis and the Israelis to do monitoring inside the United States, because the NSA doesn't do human intelligence. The CIA is not allowed to do, legally anyway, operations inside the United States. So we'll allow the Saudis and Israelis to operate illegally inside the United States without the knowledge of the FBI or the Department of State, and that they'll follow these specific individuals. How else was it that Saudi agents like Omar al-Bayoumi knew that Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi would enter a halal restaurant in Los Angeles when there are hundreds of restaurants in, I forgot the name of that city in Los Angeles, town in Los Angeles. He just so happened to be there. And his excuse to the 9/11 Commission, Omar al-Bayoumi, was that I was just in the restaurant. He was actually sitting down. According to people who knew more about Bayoumi, like Fahad al-Tamari, Omar al-Bayoumi walked in the restaurant when Khalid al-Mihdhar and Nawaf al-Hazmi were there, not the other way around. Who told the Israeli moving companies like Urban Moving Systems, Classic International Movies, that they were monitoring people who were going to be involved with the 9/11 attacks in the Hamburg cell? That's Mohammed Atta and Ziad Jarrah and Marwan al-Shehhi. And later on, the Muscle hijackers came in 2001, in 2000, late 2000. That these Israeli art students and the movie companies, the art student ring, not the ones that were in the World Trade Center, they're not even Israeli. Another obfuscation, another conspiracy, fringe conspiracy by 9/11 Truth Movement, to hide the fact that the art student ring was bigger and more expansive than the 6 guys from Germany working on a dumb art project. The art student ring who were living just miles away from Muhammad Atta in Hollywood, Florida, and Marwan al-Shehhi.
That general, but
Who knows who told them? How did they know to follow these people?
we do have areas of exposure. You know, as a mom, as a person who protects her children, her grandchildren, my husband and I, you know where your exposure is. So you have to make sure that those windows are closed and locked, and whatever else that you do to protect your family is taken care of. And I think that we had exposure internationally even. We had exposure with the coal, we had exposure at the East African embassies, we had exposure at Khobar Towers, and internally we had exposure at our airports, which brought such tragedy and sadness to the American people and to the families. Thank you, General. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Pelosi. Congresswoman Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to mention that from here I can barely see, but I can see the pictures of some who perished in the on September 11, and I appreciate the fact that you bring those pictures into these hearings because it keeps us focused on something that's very central to what we're looking at. I want to change the subject to something mentioned in General Hayden's testimony, I think only in General Hayden's testimony, and that is technology. He was clear about the fact that about a third of his technology is in-house, and that will go down to about 18% shortly, and he was describing some of the new contracts he's let with the private sector. I represent the district that probably makes more of our intelligence architecture than any other district in the country. And if it doesn't now, it certainly will under my leadership. But nonetheless, I think it does now. And I think that that's wonderful, and I commend the people who make it. I think that the cutting-edge technologies reside outside of the capacity of your departments. You obviously know that at NSA. The CIA knows that. That's why you set up InQtel, which is a venture capital firm that procures emerging technologies for you. And I think that has been a very successful venture, and commend you for doing that. Again, a lot of Californians are on that board. It's a good board. To you, Director Mueller, I think when one thinks about technology, you are the one who has to play the most catch-up. I think most people think that that's not a food, the way I pronounce it. Most people think that the FBI was in the dark ages, or maybe pre-dark ages, before 9/11. and the notion that you didn't have email systems, or I don't think you did, or you didn't have interoperable anything, is pretty horrifying. And I know, Director Mueller, that you're moving fast to correct all that. But my question in my 2 remaining minutes to all of you is, how do you assess the importance of technology, and not just for your individual agencies, but the importance of figuring out the digital systems that we will need to connect us together, connect the humans together, connect the information dots together, and do the kinds of data mining and other things that will augment what the overworked human forces that you have there can possibly produce, even under the best guidance.
Ma'am, it's the war winner for us, and I don't mean just because it happens to solve this particular problem, which it does. It is an expression of the strength of the American people. As an airman, I'm fond of saying the American Air Force is the military expression of the American aviation industry. With regard to NSA, we are the security expression of the American computer and telecommunications industry. We as a nation need to play to our strengths. That's our strength.
I can't add anything better than that.
And we have to, adopting technology in the FBI, going from a paper-driven organization to a digital organization will free us up, make us more horizontal, remove a lot of the bureaucracy that we've heard about in the course of these hearings, give us new opportunities, investigative tools. But I will add one caution, that with that new technology has to come training, has to come user-friendliness.
Wow, the problem is still not even being addressed. Look, the problem is clear. Yeah, I mean, lack of manpower, right? Technological advancement, especially for the FBI, it was considered like, and I think that was right on the money, that they're even below the Stone Age, right, regarding certain practices. But the one glaring problem is that you can have all the technology, you can have all the manpower, but if you don't have cooperation between the agencies, you're still stuck at the main problem, which was a lack of fundamental coordination between agencies. This was the whole problem of 9/11 in itself. The NSA didn't share information with the CIA. The CIA didn't share information with the FBI. The NSA and the CIA didn't share anything with the FBI or the or the Department of State. There's your problem. The DIA, which is the Defense Intelligence Agency, the agency of the Pentagon, they too were blocked by the CIA when they were running Able Danger program, an intelligence data mining program regarding terrorist cells operating worldwide. The CIA basically told Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer, involved with Able Danger, they weren't going to share any data with the DIA because they considered their operation a threat to Alex Station. Yeah, so that's what should be addressed. Not technology, not manpower. That should be secondary.
It has to be changes in job descriptions. It has to be changes in procedures. It is one thing to bring in boxes. You can bring in the computer, you can bring in the software, you can bring in the hardware. But if you do not provide the changed business practices, if you do not provide the training, if you do not provide the user-friendly interfaces, then you will be going no place. And so while people talk of technology, you can't talk of technology divorced from what you're doing throughout the organization. And to the extent that we can adopt the technology and change the organization, it will give us the freedom to be far more agile, flexible than we've been in the past.
Well, I agree with that. My light is on, but I would just add that we are confronting a digital foe. Those who threaten us know how to use technology. They don't necessarily own it, but they embed messages in other communications architectures, and we're discovering that finally, and it's a good thing that we are. But we need to be one step ahead of those folks, and one of the additional features of the Homeland Security Department legislation we keep talking about is a front door for emerging private sector technologies that should help us get one step ahead of the terrorists.
Can I make one a response to that, if I could, Mr. Chairman? That is that while I say we are behind in providing our agents the technology they need to centralize, analyze, and disseminate the information, we are on the cutting edge, I believe, when it comes to investigating any aspect of computer crimes, whether it be denial of service attacks or worms or viruses or hacking attacks and the like. And we have to build on that expertise that we have in-house as we develop the technology throughout the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Congresswoman Harmon. As Senator Shelby has already done, I'm going to have to leave at this time. I wish to again express my appreciation for the service that each of you gentlemen is rendering to our country and for your service to our joint inquiry today. I am going to turn the gavel over as directed by Co-Chairman Goss to Congressman Bereuter, who also will be the next questioner. After we complete this last of our public hearings, our task will turn to preparing a final report with recommendations. We had 3 assignments. One was to attempt to determine what happened on September the 11th, second, why it happened, and third, and I believe most important, what should we do about it? To that end, the committees will meet again, possibly during the adjournment of the Congress, in accordance with the rules that govern the convening of the meeting of the 2 committees, to commence the process of completing our task by completing our report and final recommendations. As this might be the last public opportunity to do so, again, I want to express my deepest appreciation to Ms. Eleanor Hill and to our outstanding colleagues who have placed us, I think, in such an advanced position to have told the American people with a clarity and cohesion that I do not believe they had previously had what did happen and why, and now accept the challenge of answering the question, what are we going to do about it? With those challenges still ahead of us, I say thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Graham. We just have a few members yet, it appears, to complete the questioning of the second round and the hearing. And I'll begin my comments by saying that I think we should try to learn what we can from foreign counterparts to the extent that it might be relevant and consistent with our own values and governmental system. Accordingly, I have a couple questions in that vein. And Director Mueller, I would like to direct the first one to you. Scotland Yard has a system of special branches that pass sanitized intelligence information to the police and to the private sector. The British Security Service sends staff to the special branch offices. This gives them a national reach. Do you believe this approach could work in the United States? Why and why not? Or why not?
Well, I think aspects of it certainly could work. I think our joint terrorism task forces that we've set up around the country are a variation of that type of system. We are far larger than Great Britain. We have something like 18,000 police departments, 17,000, 18,000 police departments throughout the United States. And
yeah, this is a good point by Mueller. I mean, we're such a huge country that to have a link or a singular link between the private sector and the intelligence agencies and the police departments, it's manageable in Great Britain, but it wouldn't. I mean, like I said, the technology of 2004, 17, and 21 is, far and beyond, such a wide disparity of what's created now at our disposal that they probably couldn't even realize what was being facilitated in 17 years' time, in which now we have like this coordinated effort because of viral technology that we can not just involve the private sector, but every single sector, public, and even, common sectors of the people. I mean, we can listen to police scanners. We can listen to ham radios on YouTube, for God's sakes. So, yeah, I mean, the instant intelligence and instant communication information is something that, you know, they probably couldn't dream of, which is happening right now.
And we're
So, and the FBI is still
unlike
dinosaur.
Australia, Canada, which has the RCMP, or Great Britain, and that distinction makes a big difference. We are a democracy, and we are democratized our policing within the United States. And the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, in my mind, are mechanisms whereby we can accomplish the same type of sharing that is done by Scotland Yard. One of the things we are doing is that we are integrating in the task forces individuals from the CIA in the country, so that we have ready on scene that type of information that is inside the CIA computers that can match up with the information we may have in the state and local level, which in my mind goes some distance towards accomplishing what the MI5 model does in Great Britain.
Thank you, Mr.
I think we've got to do a better job of that, but we are making strides there.
Thank you, Director Mueller. You're certainly
Oh, yeah.
right to point out the differences in our system, and especially the size of our country and the number of police departments. But I've noticed that the information technology, which you were just getting into in the end of your comments, that is being employed now, being put in place in the United Kingdom, seems to fill some of those needs, even for a vast country like our own with different political subdivisions and responsibilities. And I noticed that it's being done largely with American consulting and IT firms.
Can I add one thing there?
Yes,
It
please
has
do.
always been my cherished hope that we could, throughout the United States, standardize computer input for police departments. We tried to do it on the East Bay. It's being done in St. Louis and the like, because from county to county, police departments.
Can you, like, you know, it's amazing because we now have, I mean, it's been around for quite some time, but it's more prominent in the last 20 years since 9/11. We have an intelligence Anglosphere sharing center called the Five Eyes. And these are the countries like Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Great Britain, the United States, the 5 biggest intelligence agencies in the world, which are, it's a multilateral joint comprehensive cooperation agreement between all 5 agencies to share intelligence regarding their citizens with each other. Now, now it's more than, like, I think it's more like 30 countries now. So it's like, at the time, like 20 years ago, it was called Five Eyes. It was even during the Cold War, where we would share intelligence with Great Britain in World War II and the Cold War. And then in the late 1990s, it was called Echelon. And then later on, Five Eyes, right? So we have these agencies sharing information with each other. You know, like I said before, instant information sharing, which is, you know, the NSA's wet dream.
Police Department. We have no standard for the input of things like names, dates, and the like, standardized fields, standardized records. Were we to have that in the United States, we would have the foundation upon which to exchange the information that we want to exchange among the various law enforcement entities. But we are far ways from doing that.
Thank you. General Hayden, the Attorney General, as you may be aware,
Now, I mean, this is so important because a lot of people don't realize what the Five Eyes is. I mean, just imagine those 5 countries. Now it's like 30, all right? Can you imagine those 5 countries sharing intelligence data where they don't answer to the laws of their own country, much less other countries? So you have 5 intelligence agencies that regularly break their own judicial agencies' laws and regulations to share data of common citizens with each other. I think that's enormously dangerous, especially now with so many other countries now involved. And what's it going to look like? One giant signals intelligence data sharing center. That's what it is.
Recently approved new guidelines to govern the conduct of counterterrorism investigations under the new USA Patriot Act and the FISA statute. I understand the Department of Justice has established a training program for that, and the CIA is a participant in it, a full participant, as I understand, so that this kind of information sharing about the proper use of these tools will be available. Are you aware of the training, and furthermore, most importantly, is NSA going to participate in it?
Absolutely, sir. And let me tell you, for our narrow purposes, what the Patriot Act has allowed us to do is to more readily, more quickly, more completely be able to share in information of foreign intelligence value derived from FBI FISAs. That has been a major step forward for us.
Thank you. Director
Break
Tenet.
down the walls of regulations involving the data. What did Bush say after 9/11? I don't care what you have to do, just get us the data in order to keep Americans safe, which is just a transparent, meaningless cheerleading mantra, right? In other words, the hell with civil liberties, the hell with the Constitution, the hell with the Bill of Rights. Just do what you have to do and break any law you can. They did that with the CIA. They allowed White House senior counsels like Richard Attenborough and John Yoo to authorize torture as a legal measure to extract information from enemy combatants. What is an enemy combatant? Well, it's a vague term, and it was meant to be vague because it doesn't just mean an Arab fundamentalist. It could be you or whoever the White House deems an enemy combatant. And there is no Geneva Convention for these people because that's not involved with the memo. And this was done in November of 2001. In fact, the Attorney General, John Ashcroft, when he heard about this memo, which was authorized by Dick Cheney, not Bush. He wasn't even in the White House. He was on vacation. It didn't involve John Ashcroft, who, by the way, had to scream at the Department of Justice because the Department of Justice was also not informed. So in other words, domestic authority had no authority whatsoever when it came to the authority of the White House, because it's up to the Department of Justice to label who's an enemy combatant and who's a terrorist. Now it's the White House. Did you know about that? Did anybody know about that? Colleen Powell didn't know about it. Condoleezza Rice didn't know about it. John Ashcroft didn't know about it. The neocons did. As long as Bush has plausible deniability, he didn't know about it. Well, if he did, he wasn't there to answer the questions because John Ashcroft went and spoke with who? Dick Cheney, the real president of the United States. Who's running this country?
Or Director
Sure ain't the president. Yet you still vote.
Mueller, or both of you. The MI5, again, back to the United Kingdom, and its sister foreign service, the Secret Intelligence Service, work on international terrorism jointly. They determine which service is best placed to handle a target and pursue targets collaboratively. Because international terrorism respects no borders, the service responsibilities in this area are blurred. This eliminates the need for handoff from one service to another, which has been at times a problem in our own country. What are your views on how this could be implemented in the United States?
We do it today, sir. In terms of working overseas with his legats and working with our chiefs of station, we started this 4 or 5 years ago. We do this today. I mean,
You
we
feel
have
that
handoff.
you feel that there's any difference in their ability to avoid a handoff problem because of their arrangement that you cannot or are not now matching?
No, sir, I don't know the precision of what their arrangement, I'll go take a look at it, but I know that our arrangement, in terms of how we exchange information and make determinations of where primacy lies and how we hand off to each other, has been working quite well for a number of years overseas. We're very pleased with where we are.
Director Mueller, do you have any comment with respect to
I would agree with that. I think it always we need to do it better. We ought to have enhanced exchanges. I think with the FBI's transformation of its technology capabilities, that it will much enhance our ability to be integrate our analysts, integrate our systems. But I think we've come tremendous ways, particularly in the last 4 or 5 years, and I guess especially since 9/11.
By the 9/11 victims' families was that when they handed the commission their list of questions, they said that 80% of the questions were never asked. And you'll notice in the Joint House Inquiry and 9/11 Commission, I have both of the committees posted on my playlists. I'm the only person in the world to do this, unfortunately. But I want you to read, I want you to listen to these. It's important because the important questions are not being asked. Now, poor training and not enough funds for different programs regarding, the CIA and the counterterrorism unit or the radical fundamentalist unit in the FBI, the signals directorate at the NSA, this is all trivial. Ask the hard-hitting questions. Why didn't the FBI investigate the matter of Adnan Shuknajura, who was living in Florida, Sarasota at the time, who basically was involved with maybe some of the 9/11 hijackers? Or Raid al-Hijj, the family in Sarasota, who, according to reports from the FBI, and even in the Inspector General report of the FBI, regarding in the summer months of 2001, having over Muhammad Atta Marwan al-Shahid. And then just 2 weeks prior to 9/11, the family moved out of their apartment so fast that they left most of the furniture behind. Why don't we talk about Azmat and Khan, two individuals who were in Texas at the time with box cutters and money and hair dye, and they were detained on a train by local authorities, handed over to the FBI. Why don't we talk about September 13th and 14th, about the extra people, Arabs arrested at LaGuardia and JFK airports, one dressed as a pilot trying to get on the plane. And when they looked through his ID, he was actually a relative of the bin Laden family. Who are these people? Well, we don't know, because just like the Israelis, in which we deported them out of the country without further inquiry, and which was interference by senators in New York, unnamed, in which over 250 Israeli art students were all deported. So we couldn't have questioned them. Same thing with the Saudis. All these Saudis that were involved with pre-9/11 intelligence, we can't answer them any questions. They got deported. The beauty of having foreign nationals inside the United States do the legwork for the intelligence agencies is that they're not beholden to American law. They could be deported back to their home countries and not investigated by domestic inquiries like the Joint House Inquiry. Then you have these three stooges up there basically saying, we don't know what accountability is, but we're not held accountable.
We're doing things we didn't do
You can't make this stuff up. It's a clown show.
prior to 9/11. And I think the handoff is very good now, certainly far better than it was prior to 9/11.
And the handoff problems that we focused on are primarily on Homeland Security issues during the course of this investigation. My time has expired, so I'm pleased to yield now to the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Roemer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we very much appreciate your time. You've been here for 6.5 hours, and skip your lunch, where we hope you don't skip your dinner as well. I want to be brief in asking a couple questions about progress in the war on terrorism, and maybe you can be brief back with me too. My constituents often ask me, how do we gauge the success in this war? It's tough to quantify and it's tough to explain. Director Mueller, how would you explain it to them in regards of what progress have we made on the anthrax investigation? Can you update us on that?
Well, there are several aspects to the investigation. One is looking at particular individuals. We still have individuals that we are looking at there. Another aspect of the investigation is identifying the chemical composition of the anthrax that was found in the Daschle and the Leahy letters, and comparing that anthrax to the anthrax that was found in the letters that were mailed to the Post in New York and to Brokaw. And
Yeah, there was two different types of anthrax there, right? One was a lethal strain. The other one was a clumpy gray strain, which was the most lethal. And that killed, I think, like 3 or 4 people, including one reporter from Florida. I forgot the name of the publication that was involved. Robbie Martin is, I think, the foremost expert on this and has done magnificent work. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Media Roots Radio with Abby Martin, in which they did exhaustive, extensive work on this. In fact, there was a 5-hour episode Robbie Martin did, which was, I heard 3 of the 5, and I didn't listen to the other 2, which was unbelievable. I mean, just staggering research and a clear elucidation of the information regarding the people involved with the certain individuals like Bernard Kerik and Rudy Giuliani, pre 9/11, the people that they commiserated with, and Richard Alderson, and you're right, that's, to me, one of the best podcasts ever in the history of 9/11, in which I will probably, I will link to the bottom of the description. The anthrax case, yeah, well, they arrested that one individual who killed himself, basically, and they blamed him for the attacks. And it was, I'm sorry, it was Bruce Ivins, that's right. So Bruce Ivins was blamed for the sending of the anthrax letters and killed himself. But basically, the FBI pressured him so much that he just ended up killing himself. And they had no evidence on this guy other than what they said it was true. They found out that the strain, the lethal strain I was talking about, came from an archive because it was only made in 2 areas, Russia and the United States. And the strain that was found was the strain that was located to the archives in Ames, Iowa, at the Iowa State Archives. That's where the biometric archive, anthrax archive was at. And it was called the Ames strain, and named after Ames, Iowa. And the Ames strain was the strain that was used to kill a couple of those people that were sent those letters. Now, that didn't come from Bruce Ivins, because that anthrax that was used was manipulated from the original anthrax. It was added. It was like certain chemicals that were added to this anthrax to make it more lethal. And they blamed Iraq for this. In fact, Israeli intelligence stated that Mohammed Atta, the alleged ringleader of 9/11 and alleged pilot of American Airlines 11, said that they had a meeting in Prague with Iraqi Ba'athist officials regarding obtaining chemical weapons, and one of them was anthrax. Turned out to be false. So there you have it, the FBI. There's another blame game.
Chemical and the DNA analysis of those samples is ongoing. We are utilizing that process to compare those samples to others that are known to us from a variety of laboratories.
Have we narrowed the field down to?
We are narrowing the field down, yes, but I will in the same breath say that until we have somebody identified against whom we have brought charges, I would not exclude any possibility. We always keep our minds open for any other possibility, although the investigation may be leading us down one trail and we may look like we're going in a particular way. We always have to be open to the possibilities of another source of responsibility.
And is there a time frame on this as to when you hope to conclude it?
The chemical analyses will probably be going on for several more months. I would have liked to have concluded it yesterday. I would have liked to have concluded it a year ago. And I am comfortable and confident that we are doing everything possible to identify the person responsible for those anthrax attacks. It is, and I will tell you, with the sniper attacks now, it is yet another drain on manpower for this region, but nonetheless, we understand the necessity, the desirability, the importance of doing everything we can to bring the person responsible for those anthrax deaths to justice as soon as possible.
Do you still believe, to the best of your knowledge, that this is a domestic type of attack with the anthrax, or is that still open?
Well, the reporters often report what they think we believe.
You tell me. I'll get it straight from you.
I've tried not to state what we believe. They have speculated, that, and I know at one point we had a profile of an individual that we did publish, and we have not changed that profile. But I, in the same breath, will tell you that just because the FBI, and they're very good at it, puts out a profile is not proof.
Okay.
A profile is not facts indicating a particular person was responsible for that act.
So you didn't answer my question, and that's okay, but you still don't suspect, you're not excluding anything in this?
Not excluding.
Profile is domestic, but you're not excluding a foreign source or a terrorist source. How about in terms of the sniper case? Do you have any suspicions on that?
This is
Your personal opinion on this as to what you think?
Well, I would not to express any...
George gives that every now and then. He gives his personal opinion.
But I will tell you at the outset, I believe the investigation is going exceptionally well. There is a combination of the work of state and local coming together in ways that are the way we have to do business in the future. And Charles Moose, the police chief in Montgomery County, is doing a superb job, and we have a special agent in charge there is working with him, as does ATF. Getting to your question as to where actually, my opinion, I don't think it appropriate that I give you an opinion. What I do think it appropriate is when we have evidence, we present it to the prosecutor so that an arrest can be made.
But all resources are being devoted, and you're confident
Yes.
that everything that the FBI has is being devoted to the case to help the local and state officials pursue the sniper.
And not only what the FBI has, as the newspapers reported, to the extent that we believe there are capabilities with the Department of Defense, we've reached out and sought those capabilities. We have almost 450 agents who are now participating in that investigation. I believe ATF has close to 200, and I don't have a figure myself for the number of state and local law enforcement authorities who are also participating. I will tell you we've had thousands of leads, whether it be on our tip line or others, that we are investigating, and there are hopeful leads amongst those that we have received over the last week.
I thank the director. I know my time is up. I was hopeful to ask some questions to Mr. Tenet about progress on Osama bin Laden, but maybe Mr. Reyes will do that.
Time of the gentleman's expired. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Reyes, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I only have one question, and I'll be glad to yield my time to my colleague. But the only question I had was for Mr. Tenet, and it was relevant to the testimony on page 9 that you gave, where you developed in '99 a plan to target Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda globally. And I want to assume that the plan includes specific resources, personnel, equipment, training, associated cost. And my question is, could could you furnish us a copy of that plan? I'm very much interested in
Sure.
helping the agency on several levels, including on the budget level. So
Of course.
could you furnish
course.
that to us?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to yield my time to.
Next time the director's up to our committee, I'll ask him about Osama bin Laden.
I thank you, Mr. Roemer. The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Wyden.
Thank you,
is
Mr. Chairman.
recognized.
Director Tenet, as you know, your October 7th.
By the way, I just want to touch on that. In 1999, there was a outline that Tenet gave to the head of the Counterterrorism Center, Code for Black at the CIA, which was called the Plan. And it was basically to use the Northern Alliance to get closer to the training camps in Afghanistan and collect intelligence about bin Laden's al-Qaeda unit, in which the CIA then would create stations or units which would get close by to these training camps and obtain intelligence and gather whatever they can about who's at these training camps and whether bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri, the second in command of al-Qaeda, were at these camps, in which they then could probably either capture them and rendition them to the United States or kill them.
Letter to
And that was left to the Special Activities Division Unit, the SAD, to conduct this operation. And later on, they did another covert operation, which is called Jawbreaker, Operation Jawbreaker. I did a video about that. So.
Chairman Graham generated a fair amount of discussion.
Oh, I know.
I was interested in asking about a part of it that really hadn't. The last graph in the letter says, and I quote, Iraq's increasing support to extremist Palestinians, coupled with growing indications of a relationship with al-Qaeda, suggests that Baghdad's link to terrorists will increase even absent U.S. military action. Now, I wanted to ask you about this.
I don't have it.
Because al-Qaeda's desire to overthrow secular Arab states and replace them with Islamic governments.
Finally, a really important question, right? Finally, something that makes sense, right? Because Saddam Hussein and the Ba'athist regime were secularists, according to al-Qaeda and bin Laden. In fact, bin Laden had very unkind words to say about Saddam Hussein regarding the control of the country throughout the early 1990s. Even though bin Laden uses the U.S. invasion of Iraq as a pretext for why he attacks the United States, but he despised Hussein. So this is actually the first question out of all these panel members. Finally, we get to hear, the questions that really matter.
Would threaten
Finally.
Saddam's regime itself. And so my question would be, in your view and based on the information that you have, what does Saddam gain in the long term by helping al-Qaeda? Because the question, for me at least, and I'd like you to kind of walk us through it, is that a stronger al-Qaeda puts them in a better position to overthrow his own regime, and al-Qaeda's got a desire to overthrow secular Arab states and threaten them with Islamic governments. And just, if you would, take me through the analysis there.
I actually have a different view. I actually think these distinctions between Sunnis and Shias and secularists and fundamentalists in the current environment we find ourselves in are bad distinctions to make in terms of looking at behavior for the future. What is al-Qaeda in Iraq? What would they have in common? Us, the Saudis, others. And the point I would make to you is if you look at al-Qaeda, and you can focus on Iraq or Iran or whoever you want to focus on, but in a clandestine relationship where things are obscured and your hand is hidden, there are enormous advantages. And so I think that distinction that you're making is, now people make that distinction, sir. some people who believe
I
it's
just
important.
wanted to get your sense of it.
I don't personally buy into it. I actually think we
Bingo, right? You don't buy into it. Why? Look, days after 9/11, it was the neocons, Richard Pearl, Douglas Feit, Paul Wolfowitz, right? These guys, people from the State Department, Scooter Libby, Richard Armitage. All these guys were telling the Bush White House, we need to connect 9/11 to Iraq, not to Afghanistan. They went to Richard Clark, head of the National Security Council in the White House. And it was basically Richard Pearl who told them that we're going to invade Iraq, in which it didn't even make sense. George Bush, according to Bob Woodward, Against All Enemies, in his book Against All Enemies, Bush went to Director Mueller and said, find a connection between Iraq and Al-Qaeda. He couldn't. So then they went to George Tenet, who's speaking right here. And what did the CIA do? Well, they found out that there was a captured militant in Egypt named Sheikh Ibn al-Libya, and they tortured him. He was renditioned to the CIA black site, and they tortured him to where he said that, yes, there was Al-Qaeda meeting with Ba'athist officials in Iraq about obtaining chemical and biological weapons. That information was used in the National Security, United Nations Security Council brief read by Colin Powell, the Secretary of State. After the US invaded Iraq, they found out that that information was contradicted by other Al-Qaeda members who were captured later. So they went back to Sheikh Ibn al-Libya. And they said, why did you lie to us? And what did he say? I told you whatever you wanted to hear so that you stop torturing me.
should think about Al-Qaeda as a front company that will take capability wherever it can get it to further its own operational goals, and where there's a confluence of a target that's common and interesting, everybody benefits. So the letter, in terms of the things we've seen that we've declassified, senior level contacts, trainings in poisons and gases, among WMD
None of that was found in Iraq.
relationships, etc. You've seen the letter. You know, when you peel this story back, I don't know where it's going to take you.
Like Nur Sharia, when she gave that testimony to the House Select Committee, right? I think it was the House Select Committee, could be wrong about the committee. Anyway, she was the alleged nurse, in which she was the daughter, I think, of the, she was the daughter of, Lebanese member, parliament member, or something like that. And he had connections with the U.S. Find out she wasn't a nurse. She wasn't even a nurse. So she made up that whole testimony, and she was coached for weeks how to cry and how to read the testimony letter, and all of it was false. And that was the first Gulf War.
As is often the case in these terrorism looks, when you peel the onion back, you find more and more all the time. The only thing I would say is keep your mind open. And don't get, you know, we shouldn't just think about this in conventional terms, because they don't think about it that way.
Well, I don't have any quarrel with your analysis, and I think that the distinction really is, and you seem to suggest these people are just thinking short-term, and looking for every possible opportunity, and their short-term interest is to be against the United States. But somehow we've got to reconcile that with some of the long-term considerations as well, and that's what I was asking about. The last point I would make, just as we wrap up these hearings, and I guess I'm in a position to be the last to wrap up the public hearings, is that when I look down the road to where we ought to be, it seems to me we have to create a new balance. I mean, there is a clear need to protect the people of this country, and that requires that sensitive information not be out across the streets of this country. At the same time, there is a public right to know, and in effect there is a public need to know, which is what I was trying to address with respect to what I think is the clear overclassification concern that I brought up. What we're going to try to do up here is to give you all the tools to do it. That's what initiatives like the terrorist identification system that I've developed is a part of. And we need you all to meet us halfway. And that means getting at the abuses, for example, in the classification area. I tried to skim over your testimony again. I didn't see the word classification come up. Now, I will accept you at your word because you have been blunt and straight with me in the past that when you say you're going to follow up on it, you do. But this has got to change. I mean, there have been abuses. Pat Moynihan's been talking about that for years. And I think that what we're talking about is a new balance between ensuring that sensitive information that can't get out, that would threaten this country's well-being, is protected, but that we also take steps to ensure that the public's right and need to know is addressed. And suffice it to say, there is a lot of work to do to secure that new balance.
I'll work with you, Senator.
Damn right. Ron Wyden, he's the man, actually. He's a prominent Intelligence House Oversight member who investigated the NSA's abusive privacy rights of American citizens and sharing and obtaining data without a warrant. And he is a leading member of that fight, and I respect him for it. Unfortunately, there are a multitude of problems going on here. And one of them is our foreign policy. I mean, this is the heart of the matter. Okay? Intelligence agencies collect data. They send that data to who? The people who are in charge, ultimately in charge of the country. The government, federal government, White House, the Pentagon. Them. And right, do they share all the data? Is the data being shared with certain members of the White House, certain members of the federal government? Is it being shared with other foreign intelligence agencies and other foreign intelligence governments? Yeah, that could be a possibility too. Why? Because ultimately, it's foreign policy. That's number one. The shaping of the world, the control of the world, majority of it anyway, is through U.S. foreign policy. That involves the Pentagon, the fossil fuel industry, the banking industry, private military industrialists, the foreign lobbyists. Now we're talking trillions of dollars, 3.3 trillion just in Afghanistan alone, which was an absolute 100% failure across the board. The people who died, Americans and Afghanis and foreigners, all died for nothing. We gave the country back to the Taliban. It was through the Taliban that we invaded and fought against. And yet the Taliban, 20 years later, the longest war in American history, took control back of the country without a fight. Iraq, an utter outright failure and a war crime. Crimes against aggression, crime against humanity. But the United States are not part of the Rome statutes. Neither is Israel, North Korea, and Iraq. I wonder why. Because the United States are the biggest abusers of human rights in the world, bar none. By using intelligence agencies like the CIA to commit coups and civil unrests and false flags around the world. That's not speculation, it's fact. Now, another point would be the intelligence agencies. We do not have enough oversight into these intelligence agencies, and the oversight that we did have prior to 9/11 failed. The CIA failed us, the NSA failed us right off the board. Nobody was held accountable. You heard Richard Shelby in talking about accountability. Did you hear any accountability in all three of the directors of the agencies? Any accountability at all? No, zero. Big bet, zero. Zero. They couldn't even explain what accountability was. They can't tell you that. Sharing of information through the legal revenues, through the according to them, lacked manpower. Well, they had the data. They had an overwhelming amount of data, and they did nothing with it. Well, they did something with it. They didn't share it. Lastly, our allies, our alleged allies, specifically in this instance, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf, Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Israel, because they're synonymous with one another. The United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, not just in regards to intelligence, but also foreign policy. We have vested interests, economic, with Saudi Arabia. We have a vested interest with Israel, but that's basically on politics, policy, not money, because Israel is not a rich nation. Two vested interests, but similar goals regarding the Middle East. These are the things that we have to be talking about. And the 9/11 Truth Movement, after 20 years, has been 100% an abject failure in addressing these issues, because to them, they would rather stay at ground zero and talk about how World Trade Center 7, a building you never heard of, and we're talking about you people in North Dakota, that you didn't even know that collapsed. Meanwhile, for 7 straight days after 9/11, all they were talking about was the collapses of the World Trade Center. No, that should take precedence. By the way, the lack of plane debris. Oh, no hijackers and no hijacked planes. That should take precedent. And now you wonder why the 9/11 Truth Movement has been literally invisible. They're not making any inroads, not in the judicial sense. That's what matters. And the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, outright crackpots. When you have Barbara Honegger and Jane Clark, who don't even believe planes were even hijacked in 9/11, are in charge of the board of directors, or part of the board of directors. Now they have Richard Gage. Good luck, because they're not winning here in New York. They're not going to do anything until you start talking about these issues. And these are the issues that matter. And that's why I'll continue to do these videos.